Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MPF webinar for May of 2023. We are glad you are here. We have great faculty, as always, and pleased to introduce Bill Mech and Rob Mattern. Bill, welcome. Glad you're with us.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
And where do you sit today, sir?
Chicago.
Beautiful. Love your city. Absolutely. Love your city. Summertime. Can't beat it.
Yep.
So thanks for being with us. And Rob, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Where are you hanging out this afternoon?
I'm at home this week, which is nice, right outside Philadelphia.
It's always nice to be home. And Uri, always good to see you. It hasn't been that long since we last connected. Where are you today and how's it going?
Thanks, John. I'm sitting in the Middle East in Israel right now. It was good seeing you last week in New York. That was fun.
It was fun. We connected, twice in the last 2 weeks in Atlanta. We did a leadership show, and Uri's shown up for, a dozen years or so, and traveled on up to New York, New Jersey, and good turnouts there. And so always good connecting with you. You get around, my friend. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I got some more miles than you, but you go on plenty of trips yourself, John.
Yeah, but my trips are from Atlanta to Des Moines or Atlanta to Pittsburgh. You know, you're going bigger, better places than I am. But good to have you with us and welcome everyone again. We'll begin at the top of the hour sharp with a formal introduction and welcoming remarks. We'll introduce Bill, we'll introduce Rob. As always, today's program is chock full of some data we've collected at point of registration. We asked you all about 4 or 5 questions, so we'll showcase that and also present a few live polling questions. And we'll talk about those results as we go through the program. Sharp finish at 3 o'clock. Today's program is recorded and it will be archived on our website along with all the other recordings of webinars we've been doing since COVID. This is our 35th. And the handouts are on the website. All the recordings are on the website, so avail yourself. We've covered lots of topics in these past 2.5 years or so, and today's topic about expense right sizing.
3 years.
As we adjust from COVID and a lot of empty offices and a lot of remote working going on, and how can your firm perhaps take advantage of some opportunities to right size and trim some expenses? And we've got a couple of experts in this area who are kind enough to join us today's conversation. So we'll get started shortly, and thank you again for being here, everyone. We are recorded, as I mentioned, so be aware of that and get your voting fingers ready as we get into the program. So it's 1:59, and we'll get started shortly. And I just saw my clock turn to 2 o'clock, so shortly's passed. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the MPF webinar, our series. This is our 35th, and today's topic is what every managing partner needs to know about expense right sizing. Often we look at the top line to improve profitability, but it never hurts to take a good hard look at that bottom line, that expense line, see where you can achieve some cost savings, particularly as we emerge from COVID and look at, the office space and the technology and all those things it takes to run a successful law firm. So let's jump right in here. Welcome. First want to introduce my colleague, Uri Gutfreund. Uri, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Good to see you as well.
Likewise, Uri is a senior vice president at Ames and Goff, risk management services to law firms. Writes a lot of policies for smaller, mid-sized law firms all over the country. Cyber security, probably a hot expense item these days.
We will get to that.
A little bit about insurance. So welcome. And I run the managing partner program and do a little consulting work on the side. We call it the Remsen Group. So if you got a retreat coming up and are desperate for a speaker, give us a shout. We hold these webinars on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, 2 o'clock. Hard to believe this is our 35th. Upcoming program, a fall symposium will be presenting in Chicago. And we are looking at a program on empowering women in law firm leadership, details to follow. And next month, we're going to do a very special, kind of a different webinar where we're going to highlight results of our recently completed MPF survey. We had 182 managing partners weighing in on 50-some questions. We collected a lot of data at our MPF conference 2 weeks ago, and we're going to compile all that and present a webinar, 90 minutes, that kind of looks at how smaller mid-sized firms are evolving and adapting to the changing marketplace. So be on the lookout for those details. It's going to be a special webinar. We're going to have some panelists. Uri's going to co-host. And then we'll pick up on these freebies we do on the third Wednesday as well. We'll do one in June. So be on the lookout for those details. Our weekly goes out on Fridays, and we run a website trying to help managing partners, law firm leaders be more effective in a very challenging role. Today's topic, right sizing. Improving profitability. Your partners love it if you can improve the profitability of your law firm through expense right sizing. We have 150, almost 150 managing partners, firm leaders signed up for today's program. We got survey results, audience polling, and all this handout material will be shipped your way following today's program. When you leave, you will be directed to a questionnaire, very brief, just 4 questions. Please take the time. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like about today's program, topics for future programs. We really do tune into that. Please give us your feedback. They're really important to us and our panelists. Our faculty today, we are honored to introduce 2 very distinguished law firm administrators, and Bill Mech is in-house. He's a CLM at a Chicago firm, Goldberg Kohn. And before that, Bill's a couple of stints at other law firms, Cunningham Meyer in Chicago, Squire Sanders, office administrator in Cleveland, worked at Thompson Hine before that. So Bill's worked with a lot of law firms, seen a lot of situations, brings a lot of experience to today's conversation. So Bill, welcome. And I got to ask, what's this CLM all about?
Certified Legal Manager, huh? That's a big deal over at the ALA. It's a pretty distinguished resume identifier, but it's really intended to represent a kind of a wide breadth of education that most administrators need. And so the CLM is a certification program to kind of assure a core level of competency for all administrators. So it's a very, very good program.
And Bill, just for clarification, you are not an attorney, is that correct?
I am not an attorney, although I do play one on TV. I'm kidding. No,
I'm not a lawyer, but sometimes people assume I am. I let them assume that. But we spent a lot of time at Uri's program last week in New York and our show in Atlanta about the value non-lawyers, revenue enablers bring to law firms, and why it's important for lawyers to recognize and value what us non-lawyers can bring to the table, and what a guy like Bill Mech can do if you bring him in, let him roll, and pay attention to what he has to say. So Bill, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And joining us as well is Rob Mattern. And Rob runs Mattern Associates. Let me get your bio here, Rob. I just had it in front of me, but you'll fill me in. You went to Drexel, I noticed, MBA, Villanova undergrad, works in and around Philadelphia area, but your clients are all over the planet, are they not?
All over the planet, and planet includes Canada, and we're doing a lot of IG work, information governance work, for firms that have offices in Europe.
Interesting.
So, yeah, we're traveling quite a bit.
You know, we might talk a little bit about IA I'm not sure we'll get into it, but boy, that's starting to capture the attention of a lot of firm leaders, and getting into some programming around the IA, its impact on law, on mid-law in particular. So thanks for the welcoming remarks, gentlemen, and off we go. Today's program is being presented by Mattern. Check them out, and Rob will tell you a little bit more about what his company does, the services it provides law firms, a market leader, and does a lot of work with big law, but bringing it down to smaller and mid-sized law firms as well. So, Rob, thank you for being with us today. Our first audience polling question. Uri, I'm not going to tell my stale jokes about elections in Georgia.
Don't tell the joke.
We'll just get right to the vote. But for the benefit of our panel and everyone on today's call, if you could tell us briefly your firm's size, and take a minute, punch it in, 1 through 5, depending on the sizes of your firm. I'll lock this up once we get about 80% of you voting. And it looks like we're at about 2/3, up to 70%. How big is your firm in terms of lawyer headcount? And we'll close the poll and share those results for Bill and for Rob in terms of firm sizes. You know, this is our sweet spot. The mid-sized firms, say 10 to 75 lawyers, 10 to 100 lawyers. So that's sort of spot on with the types of folks we normally bring to our programs. The big squeeze, Uri, you talk about it. The big squeeze on profitability. And you know, we got rising expenses. We've got associate salaries really going crazy on us. Maybe some challenges passing through our rate increases to clients, a squeeze on profitability. Talk to us about that, Uri. You just did an economic survey up in New York, New Jersey, and you talked a lot about this last week at our programs up in your part of the country.
Yeah, the results we see, I mean, you kind of said it in your question, John, which is we're seeing expenses generally going into 2022. So now as we look at that financial data, we really saw it, that drop in profit going down from 21 to 22. And it's exactly as you said, compensation for associates, which for a lot of firms and other employed lawyers is the number 1 expense. It's up 20%. So there are lots of firms that their realized rate increases, collecting money in the bank was not exceeding their expenses. So if the expenses are going up and your collectibles are not going up commensurate, it's coming right out of the profit pool. So we saw a big drop in 2022.
Well, Uri, as you know, a lot of firms went about rate increases this year pretty aggressively. You know, we polled our members about that. That's some as many as 10% higher. Are they getting it in the bank, though, is the question. We asked you all when you registered, what do you project to be your profitability this year versus last? 40% say higher. Where's the squeeze, Uri? Only 2% say considerably lower. This crowd apparently ain't feeling the squeeze, at least not yet.
Well, I think it'll be the same as 22, John. You asked 23 to 22. I think it'll be like 22. 22 was a big drop down from 21. That's what I'm saying.
Bill, comments, surprises to this data we see from today's registrants?
Yeah, I mean, not to sort of agree with Uri out of the box here, but you're not wrong.
No, not out of the box, Bill.
Wrong. No, he's not wrong. Not wrong. What I think we're missing a little bit is a little bit more perspective. So while 22, sure, it was a little bit down compared to 21. If you go back to like 18, 19, right? 22 was actually still on an upward trajectory for, I believe, a lot of firms. And so, because obviously, the pandemic years were an anomaly, so we have to obviously not ignore those, because boy, if we could sustain that for a little longer, we'd all be happy, right? But the real world's upon us. But I think we're still seeing that trend, and we expect that to continue through 23. So not meteoric adjustments, but stable and healthy adjustments, and everything we're saying is supporting that.
We want PPP loan money every year, and work that into work that into our budgets. Rob, as you look at this initial sort of set of data, surprised that firms aren't projecting a little more decrease in profitability?
Yeah, based upon what you're reading, based upon when you're talking to people out there, I was pleasantly surprised at these numbers. Now, again, I think if you went into like the AmLaw 50, AmLaw 100, I think you would see different results. I think the bigger firms taking a little bit more of a hit than I think the participants in the survey.
I would agree with that. I think big law has been hit harder than mid law in terms of some of this stuff. Bill?
We might get to this later, but obviously I think one of the reasons for that, and I agree, is that they overhired a lot more than mid-sized firms who were more conservative through the pandemic recovery. Yeah.
You registered, we also asked among the big 5 expense categories in law firm, what's growing most rapidly? You know, you got your salaries for your associates, your support staff, technology, insurance. We put marketing and business development in there as well. Nobody gave that as an answer, interestingly. Salaries, are they controllable? We look at realization rates among associates, finding them in the mid 80s. Too many? Comments on this? Rob, I'll invite your comments to this slide.
Start with me. I think you're definitely seeing the larger firms, as we talked about, overhired. I think you're seeing some of that here. I think that's the explanation for the lower, slightly lower realization you're seeing. But no, it's that's law firm's biggest expense by far is what they're paying people. And I think the associates market, as you're reading, has been I don't want to say out of control, but it has been aggressive, for lack of a better term.
The dollars to associates you're talking about.
Yes.
Will we see an adjustment, you think, in the coming year or two?
I think everything runs in cycles. So I would venture to say that, yeah, you're going to see some moderation there. Again, the more highly skilled, highly sought after won't. But I think overall, you're going to see some modification.
Bill, are you finding it easier to recruit lawyers, young lawyers to your firm past year or so?
Well, with some of the new press that's out there, we're actually, with the large firms making some staffing adjustments, that bodes well for mid-sized firms who might look a lot more attractive to some of those former big firm associates. So, I think the short answer, the climate for recruiting has never been sort of great. It's been challenging in recent years. I don't think it's eased a lot. We still see a pretty steady flow of candidates, but it's still a strong competition for quality people.
And Uri, New York, seems to get to be on the edge of this economic recession a little more urgently than other parts of the country. We read a lot about associate layoffs from big law. What you got going on in New York, New Jersey that you think is worth noting for our audience today?
We definitely see more candidates now than we've seen in the past. And the biggest change has been a little less pressure on protecting our people, right? There was a time not that long ago, it was only 8 months ago, where we couldn't get enough people. We couldn't get people. People were poaching our people every day. Now the poaching has dropped down. Managing partners feel a little less nervous every day, waking up, who's going to come into my office and say, I really don't want to leave, but you get tired of those conversations. So a little fewer of those, a little less pressure on retaining your people.
When we were preparing for today's program, Bill, you had a few comments about real estate and your office leasing, and is that an area to focus some attention? Talk to us about real estate.
I think it is, if you can. You'll notice back on your entrance poll where people asked about costs that are adjusting or increasing, and real estate was not on there, office space is not on there, obviously because it's pretty much a fixed expense for everybody.
This
So it's
slide.
not exactly, which is, so it's no surprise to me that the rent is only at 1. And that's a reflection of that reality. It's viewed as a fixed expense. But I think people, unfortunately the sublet market, would have been an avenue for a lot of us, but it's saturated in most metropolitan areas. So that's not really a thing there. But I tell you what firms are doing, and my firm's not excluded from that, is we're aggressively looking forward and say, when can we begin the process? Like, when can we take a hard look at our space, that our lease commitments, where do we want to be, what are we going to need? And I think those efforts going forward are going to be a lot more robust, invest a lot more time and energy into those, because I think we're going to include factors that we never needed to include before, addressing the whole hybrid world and how does that change our needs and things like that. So those are going to become paramount when firms have that opportunity to renew their leases, and they're going to be very aggressive about that. And many already are, if they're at that point in their cycle.
We did a point counterpoint webinar early on, and one managing partner is, you come back to the office or you're fired. And the other managing partner is saying, what? We're going close to virtual and really downsizing our footprint, accommodating remote work. And both of them have moderated their opinions substantially since they originally went out there. And the guy that says, no, we're going remote, starts to recognize, that culture, working remotely, people kind of want to be together, and has really softened the position. The other fella, come in or you're fired a lot of people. And then, I guess they fired themselves by not wanting to come in, but he has really softened his stance. So, firms are really trying to figure this out as leases come up. Our next slide here gets into something that might be a little more within our control immediately, and that's this back office, the technology, the records management. Look familiar, anyone? A lot of empty office space out there, and a lot of mismanagement of records. We asked, when you registered, are you satisfied with your firm's current management maintenance system? And over a third of you said, no, we're not. So here, Rob, here's your segue as we talk about hybrid work, expense right sizing. You guys ask, I'm going to quickly blow through these questions and we'll get to talking, is this whole hybrid work thing we're all trying to figure out. And, it's all over the place in terms of how firms are dealing with it, demographics of the firm, the clients, all sorts of things. So we'll ask a few questions about hybrid. These questions come to us from Bill. Talk a little bit, and then we'll jump into our real reason we're here. Position on hybrid work schedules for associates. Let me pull up our polling mechanism here and set us up to our question here, if you would, Bill. What your thinking was?
Well, I just sort of wanted to give you the spectrum of what I've seen firms doing. They're either kind of going at this full bore, as you mentioned a minute ago. I'm curious how many firms are still there. I think we're going to see a whole lot in the passive area, would be my prediction. But I'm still curious about, firms who might be taking a stronger position on it. There are some folks that have very strong beliefs about discouraging hybrid or prohibiting it flat out. So
you think passively support will be the popular answer here to this polling question? Passive support?
That would be my prediction.
Rob, what say you?
I'm in the passive support area too.
And you guys are looking smart, gentlemen. Passive support. Fully support, 34%.
There you go.
And 0% prohibiting hybrid work. That's interesting.
They learned from AmLaw 100 on that one.
Hey, lawyers can learn. It's an amazing thing. They love the data. It can be very persuasive. We're now going to kind of look at support staff. Same question, but geared toward your support staff. And Bill, as people are voting in, what do you think? Different approach to support staff than the lawyers?
Yeah, I think we'll see the results slide more towards discourage or prohibit It varies, of course, by position, but just as
Yep.
a general position, I think most firms have wanted support staff in and available, and have struggled trying to virtualize those, at least some of those roles.
So more flexibility to the lawyers. Rob?
I agree 1,000% with Bill.
And
He always-
1,000%.
He
That's a ringing endorsement there. Uri, what do you think folks are going to say on this one? Staff.
I think we're going to be in the discouraged, and I just point out we did a webinar early on. I think it was mid to late 2020, John. And if you recall, we drilled down, why do you need your support staff in? And John, do you remember what people said?
Well, I think this notion that we lose productivity when people work remotely, they get distracted.
They're not working. Yep.
You know, employees, non-lawyers especially, are inherently lazy, and we can't trust them if we can't see them in their cubicles.
That was the feedback we got. That was the feedback we got from partners. People can watch that recording. Let's see how they
here is the answer. There does just seem to be a bit less flexibility towards support staff, but only 15% say they prohibit. Now, that's a very general question. It does depend on a lot of factors, as Bill mentioned. But
it proves that I'm pretty good at this, though, John.
You are. We're going to put you on the payroll here. I like it. This technology is fun.
Can I toss in something, though?
Of course.
Yuri, to your point about your feedback from your managing partners, completely hear that, completely appreciate it and understand it. But here's what I would caution people, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm a manager, right? I grew up supervising, managing people. Don't confuse performance, or don't forget that a big component of assessing performance is how effectively they're being supervised. Okay, one of the challenges, the hybrid world, right, is we need to work differently. We need to supervise, manage differently. And you know as well as I do that very few people are making that turn effectively. It's a process, we're learning, but I think that is very much reflective of the results you described, Yuri. I firmly believe that most of our employees mean well, do well, and care about the firms they work for. There's always exceptions, but generally speaking, and so I think if we can improve our supervision of them, you're gonna find better utilization of them.
Bill, one of the things, it's that perception, and back in 2020, I think managing partners had this feeling, attorneys, I can measure, they're all on the billing system. We look at hours, we look at our hours.
Productivity in the hours.
The staff measuring productivity pre-COVID, you know how you did that? You walked around, you said, oh, there Joe's there, Mark is there. That's obviously not going to work in a remote. It's obviously not sophisticated. It obviously needed to be improved. And then COVID led to this, I agree with you, this misconception that when I don't see people, they're not working. I mean, that's crazy. And in no other position would that be acceptable.
1,000%.
1,000%.
That's exactly right. And the truth is I mean, obviously there's no scientific data here, but my presumption is that they know as little now about their staff performance as they did then, walking around.
I think, another thing we've seen is that, the folks that were goofing off in the office are the same folks that tend to goof off remotely, hiring the right people, managing them well, the feedback, so important.
Yeah,
I think different.
Yeah, I tell you, if I could add something, I think you're going to see the most successful firms going forward are the ones who are able to shift their paradigm on the management of their people. And I was at another conference last week, and again, the younger people they want meaningful work, they want to be appreciated and so on like that. Much different than when we were that age group. But that's what law firms are going to be facing in the next 2 decades.
Yeah.
How those people want to be treated. And the whole Jamie Dixon, everyone back in the office, or the attorney you mentioned about, hey, 100% back to work, it's not going to fly. And you're going to see the talented people going to the firms that provide that flexibility.
But the risk is, though, Rob, that law firms historically, right, we steer like we do cruise ships, right? Slow, too slow. And so it's a very, very high area of risk, I think. operationally going forward.
You know, we're hearing from a lot of managing partners, hiring partners. Among the first questions they get from talent looking for positions are questions around culture. That didn't happen before. And questions around remote work. Things like diversity, equity, and inclusion matter. And culture matters. And how would we describe that? What are we building? We have one if we're deliberate and intentional or not.
Yeah.
But culture, really, really important. And
to reinforce that, John, I just hired a C-suite position for my firm, and most of the top candidates I talked to were leaving a firm. They weren't looking for my position, they were leaving. And I think that's a wake-up call for these firms. They were actively saying, I know I don't want to work like this for an organization who thinks like this anymore. I was shocked how widespread I saw that.
Interesting. And were you out at the ALA conference in Seattle, Bill, and had a chance to talk to a lot of your peers?
I wasn't able to join that conference though this year. No.
It's a good group, ALA. We tout it all the time, and the CLM designation. You know, get your people out involved in LMA, the marketers, ILTA, the technology people. Get them out there, involved in these organizations, so you can learn, how firms are evolving and adapting. We hear it all the time from managing partners to our conferences. We're not alone. I thought we were the only firm dealing with this stuff. Right. No, we're all dealing with these things very. Rob, now we're going to shift to the heart of our conversation, which is improving profitability through expense management. Improving profitability. And we got a polling question, and I'm going to let you kind of take over the conversation at this point. But why don't you set up our question for us here and talk to us about what firms are doing on the expense side to improve that bottom line.
Okay. Again, we're taking a look at what firms are doing to increase their bottom line. Again, raise rates does not fall into that category, but all the others: reduce staff, reduce office space, right size your contracts, and redeploy your administrative services. How you're providing services to your
click all that applies. So what strategies is your firm deploying at the present time to improve, maintain profitability? All that apply. And Rob, as the votes are coming in, I'll put you on the spot here and ask you what you think the top 2 things firms are doing from this list to improve their bottom line.
Well, I tell you, if you're not, you should be raising your rates on a yearly basis. Understandable if, for certain clients are excluded there, but again, you got to be pushing your rates. That's something you should be doing all the time. As Bill mentioned earlier, you reduce your space. That's not something that should be in focused, but again, you got to take advantage of that opportunity when it does come up. The areas that you do have ultimate control over is, one, your staffing and your contracts and how you're delivering administrative services. And we do a lot of studies in this area for firms to say, hey, listen, do we have the right people being paid the right amount of money doing the right tasks? And you'll be shocked about with the data that we get back of how much administrative burden is being pushed to the attorneys nowadays in this remote hybrid environment. And that's not what you want your attorneys to do. We want to make sure they're doing billable work.
What do you think are top 2? Raise rates, you think's pretty commonplace? Most everybody's doing that?
I would say so.
Yeah. And what do you think beyond that? Looking at these other 4 items, firms might be focusing attention.
Well, again, all you read about in the paper, again, mostly with the bigger firms, is reducing staff.
Staff.
I would say in this group that we're talking to today, I would say I'll go out on a limb and say right size contracts.
Bill?
I don't disagree. I'm curious actually to see, because of the demographics of the attendees today, I agree with Rob that, rates are kind of a default. But I think the other ones are going to be hit or miss. It might be kind of an even spread across them, I would think. So.
Excellent. Uri, I'm going to ask you for your weigh in before we do the big reveal.
Yeah, I think raise rates. I don't think they reduce staff. I have so many people who I they're still shell shocked from, scrapping around for people the last couple of years. I don't think we'll see that. Wow.
Where are those rate increases? And we did surveys on the rate increases, and we're encouraging firms to not be shy, be assertive. Costs have gone up, and I think people expect rate increases, and build that in every year.
Yep.
Don't wait 3-4 years and then start jacking rates to longstanding clients. That usually doesn't go over very well, but embed that into your into the way you operate every year. Rates up 5%.
If you're in that 7%, take a photo of this screen.
Yeah.
Take your executive committee. That's what this.
We will share the results, no doubt. It's funny at our conferences, people come up with their iPhones and start taking pictures of the PowerPoint. It's like, no, we'll send this to you, and so we will send it to you definitely. Rob, looking at this, looks like you were spot on.
Well, I don't know about spot on there, and I don't usually have too good of luck in selecting this stuff. I picked the 76ers to win Game 7 against the Celtics. So, but I tell you, I'm happy to see that again, all the eggs are not in one basket on the expense side here, that they're looking at everything and really redeploying administrative services. That, to me, that's huge. And that's two things. One is, reducing expenses, and also two, in the hybrid environment, adapting to what you need to do to deliver services to your attorneys. So I think that really I'm very, very happy with that distribution.
Our last polling question, and then Rob, Bill, we're going to let you guys kind of run, and you've got an outline of things. We've got questions the registrants have posed, and we'll go through those and talk it through. This is our last formal polling question of the day, which speaks to pretty simple yes or no question. Is your firm focusing on expense reduction more than usual this year as we emerge from COVID and assess our operations? And Bill, I'm going to put you on the spot. You think most firms are taking a harder look at expenses this year?
A harder look than usual. I think because of that qualifier.
Yeah, that's where we phrased it.
50-50. I think we'll see 50-50 on it, because I think there's a steady look. I think most firms are pretty consistent. Okay.
I would think it's something they're looking at all the time.
Yeah,
where to trim expenses and trim fat from the budget. But yeah, look here, 2/3. Flat out 2/3 say we're spending a little more focus on the bottom line this year than normal. So,
John, I'll just add, I am not at all surprised at that.
I'm not either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think firms are definitely more expense focused now than ever before. I think they're feeling pressure in other areas, associate salaries and something like that. So I am not at all surprised.
Well, Rob, why don't you kind of take the mic here, and you and Bill, I'm looking here at some of the things you want to talk about, the Goldberg digitization project, what that was all about, and then we'll field questions when people registered and have you guys talk us through those. So,
okay. I tell you one thing.
Take off the slide.
That's right. Oh. I sometimes forget to hide the polling results.
I tell you, really, people have asked me, hey, what are you seeing out in the marketplace? And I'll tell you, it seemed like Labor Day of last year, that law firms finally woke up and realized that hybrid was here to stay, that they're not going back to 100% back in office, or the vast majority of firms are not. They got crunched with the whole digitization of their records during COVID. And a lot of firms took that moment, and I'll say last Labor Day as a watermark, and say, hey, listen, we got to get on top of this paper issue we have, and we can't deal with paper, and we're not going to be back in the office. How do we operate in the most cost-effective, efficient way possible? And I tell you, we did a project with Goldberg that, hey, they wanted to get a grip on how they're storing their paper, and in order to do that, or how they're managing their paper and digital files, they needed information governance policy with retention. They wanted to go with a less paper on-site footprint. So we started doing a digitization project for them, that we're taking our hard copies on site and getting them into a digital format. And then this offsite record storage goes away. I'm not feeding that black hole. And the third part of the whole thing is going after that offsite record storage contracts and creating competitive situations and driving those prices down and making destruction cost effective under a new contract on a go forward basis in relation to your retention schedules. Big project.
I assume you're a cloud guy, by the way. I mean, is that a no-brainer for most firms this size?
Oh, absolutely. If you're not looking at it, you should be.
Yeah. There's still a few that hold on to those servers.
Yeah, and yeah, and you still see some typewriters out there. Okay, so
white out.
Firms still have fax machines. So again, not being critical, but no, that's a huge area that firms should be getting some traction in terms of getting direction on going to a digital environment, getting rid of this paper, getting out of this offsite record storage business in the next 7 to 10 years. And it's possible. And we're doing for, I couldn't even tell you how many firms we're doing it for, either doing the upfront policy, and not just nationally, but internationally. And there's long-term, tremendous long-term cost savings, long-term efficiencies that you're going to reap. Okay. Plus all the other benefits of, the risk, the hacking and so on like that, is taking a look at that whole thing and making sure you're just storing what you should be storing.
Right.
So I'll bounce off Bill. You tell it from your side.
Yeah. I mean, as John mentioned, when he went through my credentials, I've been at a lot of law firms, and there wasn't a single one that this wasn't a topic of conversation. But the problem was that, you really have to have the motivation behind it, right? To get something going. So Goldberg was a good example, and not different than any other. So
give us context, Bill. Tell us a little bit about Goldberg, your size, what kind of law you practice, all those good things.
Yeah, we're just under 100 lawyers, large commercial finance practice, but that's augmented with a little bankruptcy, corporate, and litigation practices as well. Even a little IP tossed in there. So, reasonably diverse firm, but very focused on commercial finance and banking.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So years ago, they actually coined this as a paper reduction effort. That's what it was called. But that's what most firms do. And people throw some rocks at it, but basically nothing happens, right? Nothing moves. And it ends up being a kind of a futile effort. Well, once the pandemic hit, and like Rob was describing, like many firms, we were just like, we're either going to start taking this seriously or we're not. And the first step in that was getting some help. So Rob's team stepped in, and they really, just as a side note, but one of the primary jobs they're doing for us is really acting as a PM. Because you have to remember that this effort is the type of effort that crosses your firm horizontally, right? It touches almost every silo within your firm, from the practices to the administrative departments. And so you can't have IT necessarily default own it. It has to be broad and across the board.
PM, project manager, is that
correct
term? Okay.
Correct. And so they're coordinating the effort. Who's doing what? Follow-up items. Is it, from the last meeting, what's our agenda? Is it done? Is it not done? What's the holdup? And so you're actually proactively moving it forward. Now, it's not a short project. This is a multi-year, like 2-3 years we're going to be at this, and we know that. So this is not one of the expense reduction things that's going to, sort of deliver a big hit to your bottom line this year. However, when you start looking at the 3, 4, 5 year projection of this stuff, you simply must be doing it. And then so it's over the long haul. This is going to be a long-term return on investment kind of a thing, but it's absolutely essential for all the reasons Rob touched on.
Boy, I'm
Bill,
a managing
when you
partner.
planned it out, Bill, did you put a context for the team? You know, here's where we're talking about expense reduction. Was there a sense, and then did you have to do some work to sort of lay out to the group, here's where we're at, here's where our goal is? I'm assuming it's going in this direction. Did you have a sense of that in the beginning?
Yeah, but you know, the expense reduction side was not first and foremost. That's just a fringe benefit in the kind of with a longer term view, but it's really the short term thing. I mean, Rob touched on a huge one. I mean, just the cybersecurity, enabling hybrid work more effectively. I mean, these are the things that were really lighting a fire under it, right? But then there's a whole professional responsibility aspect to it, right? So it kind of ties into a lot of things. So we're developing solid policy, we're making decisions about retention, like keep it, no keep it, and then those things are all going to be enforced across our systems. So it's quite a big undertaking.
So yeah, I was just going there, Bill. This seems like I'm a managing partner. I'm with you. We got to get more paperless, more automated, more efficient. Some of my partners like paper. They're more senior. It's a daunting project. Where to begin?
What
advice would you give?
If I get interject, first of all, we're not saying get rid of paper. I'm still a paper guy, okay? I just don't want to store it. I could work in it, okay? I just don't want to store it once I'm done with it, okay? So that's the difference here. And people think if you go with something like the information governance, retention, and going digital, that you can't print or you can't use paper. That's not the case. So you got to overcome that. First of all, number one. And two, it is a huge change management project. And you need upper management support. If you don't have it, then you're wasting your money. But if upper management supports it.
Upper management support, noted. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Because it is going to impact how firms operate. And again, some partners are going to easily jump on board, other ones are not. But again, I want to put that notion to rest that I can't print a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I go digital.
Well, all these lawyers who said that you can't run a law firm remotely did remarkably well when they were forced to run remotely. Took a pandemic to get us there, and we've been saying, we've learned a lot. We can be more self-sufficient, a bit more paperless. Embrace Zoom. Whoever heard of that 4 years ago, 5 years ago? And boy, the sky has not fallen. We've learned a lot, and resist that temptation to go back to the way it used to be, but to anchor these things we've learned into our culture and into the way we do things going forward. And I hear a lot of old senior lawyers, especially, boy, getting back to the way things used to be, the way it used to be. And we all know those days are long gone.
Absolutely long gone.
Yeah.
As well they should be.
Yeah.
For a lot of the in-person visits and everything like that, Zoom's fine. Again, we adapted. I think you're going to see some moderation. People are still going to travel when necessary and something like that. But yeah, those days are gone.
So
and
John,
one
more thing on motivation. Just trying to talk about this. So we had a warehouse fire, records warehouse fire. Is it 2 years ago now, Rob? I think I can.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, it wasn't like a huge portion of our inventory. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it wasn't a huge part. But we went through, very rigorous reviews of what was there, the age of it, the content, reaching out to clients when necessary.
After the fire.
After, right, for damage control and risk assessments and things like that.
Did you lose a lot of stuff, Bill? Physical boxes and stuff?
Exactly right. The entire warehouse went up. Well, and we know that there were at least 4 or 5 other firms who had even more records than we did. And the point about the moral of the story was that after we finished that thorough review, we basically found that there was literally no occurrence of risk of the loss of those documents, which means we should have never stored them in the first place, at least for as long as we did.
It took a fire to get rid of them.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, just talk about the reaction of the attorneys when we went to them and say, "Hey, listen, here's what happened." What kind of emotion do they have?
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, you could, cold sweats. Yeah, they were
I can
like,
only imagine.
I know,
But-
they were, you know, quivering. Yeah, it was like, what? You know, we lost our paper. And yeah,
At the end of the day, it was nothing.
But my story, which, like I said, it wasn't a huge percentage of our inventory, but other firms, it was a much larger, but they had the exact same experience.
Let me ask you this. We talk about cost recovery, and in the old days, you know, photocopies and fax machines and long distance phone calls. Law firms, those were little profit centers for a lot of law firms. And if we're not faxing and photocopying, is it okay to invoice for scanning?
Oh, absolutely. However, okay, well, that is one area that has increased since the pandemic. All output, paper, print, and copy, color, and black and white is down dramatically. And that's where we come into the whole expense right sizing, getting rid of your output devices. Again, a lot of people are on leases, which they shouldn't be, or if they are, they should have a certain amount of flexibility to walk away from stuff. But no doubt about it, that output's down. And, you know, are you recovering or capturing enough to cost justify a cost recovery system? And a lot of firms are falling into that bucket where they're not.
We got rid of ours. We got rid of it.
So Bill, do you guys charge for scanning and for, you know, sending a PDF that you might normally charge, you know, 75 cents per page to photocopy and FedEx?
No, yeah,
markup.
Yeah, my firm's probably not a good model for that because we've been pretty aggressive about not passing through those types of costs for a long time as just part of the culture of the firm and part of the rate structure and things like that. So we've never been one to pursue that kind of stuff, but other than special projects, of course.
Some firms are getting aggressive. A lot of firms are retreating. And we are going to have a survey results out soon on a survey we just did on that.
Definitely share it with us, Rob. We'll pass it along to through our newsletter and stuff like that. And first firm I worked with, Gunster, we tacked on an administrative fee. I think it was 5%, 6%. We didn't nickel and dime you with photocopies and long distance. And our thought was clients get annoyed when they get nickeled and dimed when they're already paying what they perceive to be top dollar. And so we just tacked on an administrative fee to cover those things. And rarely would the clients ever question it. Just passed it right on through, and there went the equi-tracking and all that nonsense. We did a lot of back in the day.
Nothing against them, but that's exactly right, John. I mean, so any firms that are still in that sort of detailed tracking cost recovery mode, what you need to do is an honest assessment of the cost of those systems, the operation and maintenance of those systems, and you will quickly deduce what we did.
So back to this daunting task of expense reduction and where to begin. And Rob, you're the expert. Give the advice to our managing partner running a 50 lawyer firm on the call that says, yeah, we got a lot of fat here. How do I get my arms around it and move on?
Okay, well, first of all, nothing is untouchable. You know, some firms look at their offsite record storage as being fixed and, you know, they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's definitely a competitive, or you have to create a competitive situation with all your contracts. Okay, just don't renew, no matter how much or how good a job that service provider is doing, is really just take a look at everything. All the contracts that support your back office. LexisNexis, another big area. Again,
and Rob, as we review contracts, and what are the biggies for most mid-sized law firms, and how negotiable are these vendors if you push back?
Oh, well, okay. The biggest ones out there are really, you know, we talked about IT managed support. Okay, that's a biggie. The legal research contracts, LexisNexis, Westlaw. Okay. If you're outsourced, if you're big enough to outsource, your outsourcing contracts usually in your top 5 expenses. And again, if you're just looking for a renewal from your service provider, you're not going to get it. Yeah, well, you'll get it, but there won't be savings. If you only way you're going to drive savings is to create a competitive situation.
So put out an RFP and solicit
RFP.
proposals, huh?
Yep. And get some benchmarks. Hey, what are other firms your size paying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that was a big question that came through on the upfront questions when Bill and I went through them is
Yes.
everybody wants to know how we compare to our peers.
Yes.
Okay. Really, there's probably about 4 or 5 questions asking that. Get some benchmarks. And if someone calls up and says, hey, I'm a 20-person firm, how much should I be paying for offsite record storage? Cubic foot. I'm more than happy to tell you. Okay. And then again, but the only way you're going to get service providers to move is to create competitive situations.
And they can't like that. The vendors, the LexisNexis and the Westlaws of the world can't like that.
Is that why you get all the death threats?
You ought to hear me talk about super lawyers.
Yeah.
But are they flexible? In fact, can you get some leverage and drive some pretty substantial savings when you do this? What could I expect to save if I'm really assertive on contract review in a good year?
It depends on how poor a contract you have. I'm telling you, it should be like 20 to 50%, depending upon the item and when that contract. I'll tell you, I'll go back to offsite record storage. A lot of people haven't looked at their offsite record storage contract since Nixon was in office. A lot of them can't even find it. A lot of them are their service provider has been purchased 3 or 4 times since that time.
Right.
And and they get from the offsite record storage provider, we can't find your contract. Well, these people are experts at storing records. You can't find their contract. So
right.
So again, that's just one area. But and also too, if you're going to use a consultant, we don't work on percentage of savings. Okay. We work on a fixed fee in all these types of situations. And I think that's important because I'm not just trying to push a solution that saves you the most money and may not work out. And that's especially true when there's labor involved. The labor aspect of any outsourcing contract, you want to make sure that they got money in there to pay their people correctly, or you're going to just have rapid turnover.
I want to shop my insurance policy. You sell insurance, right? You're a broker. You'll help shop my policy, get me the best deal, right?
A lot of pressure on that. A lot of pressure on that, and insurance companies respond to that. There's no question. Absolutely. You prepare your pitch, your broker goes to work for you. No question.
Are firms from where you sit selling insurance as aggressive as they should be in driving a good deal?
No. Often it's the broker. I mean, it's the broker's job to do that. But if it's like a not a sophisticated broker, they don't know how to really do it. But there's a lot of money there. Health insurance, big one. Cyber was already mentioned, big one. Professional liability, it's a much bigger number. You have to push on those. On those this year for sure.
Yeah, Yuri, and I tell you, and just because you go out and shop the market, it doesn't mean you have to make a switch.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people think if I go through this process, I'm going to be, I'm going to look dumb if I don't make a switch to another service provider. No, you're just going to get a much better deal from your current service provider.
I think that's right. I think people confuse, Rob, and I think it's to your point, is people think it's too much extra work. And it is if you don't have a broker who goes to the broad market, then the broker does more work, but that's okay. That's their job. That's our job, right? That's okay. But people think the only way you can do it is go all over. You have your broker do the work, right?
Yeah, I think the takeaway there, John, for your audience is that if you haven't looked at this in a while, if you're just cranking the handle with your policies and your broker is just allowing you to crank that handle every single year, you might want to consider using somebody else for a couple cycles.
Yep.
Good guidance. It's so easy to just auto renew, and we all get used to auto renewing, and reminds me I have to go back through my checking account and look at all those 999 charges that you pick up over time, and they just add up, and boy, it doesn't take too much to just bring some savings to bear. A lot of questions about the benchmarking information, Rob, at registration. You mentioned it. I know you provide quite a bit of benchmarking data around expenses relative to total expenses, revenue, what have you. What's overhead per lawyer, mid-sized firms these days?
Ooh, geez.
On average?
I would have to get back to you on that. I don't know off the top of my head. Mid-sized firm, that's a pretty broad spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Number of offices has a lot to do with it. You know, there's one thing about Bill's firm, they got one office. Their numbers are going to be dramatically different than these firms that have 7 offices with 100 attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variables to that. Geographic region plays a big part. If you're in New York versus being in, Cleveland, being in Columbus, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Their sources of benchmarking data. Bill, where do you get a sense of where you guys fit expenses and other key KPIs vis-a-vis competitors? Where do you source your benchmark?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a silver bullet for that. There isn't. And a lot of that comes from trying to find, truly comparable to
Yes,
your particular environment, your particular market, your particular practice concentration. So it's never going to be a slam dunk. But there's lots of, obviously, all the professional agencies you've talked about, ALA and others, a lot of the good consulting firms like Rob's and others that are out there that collect this data. So there's places to get it, but it's never going to be kind of a slam dunk for you. And it's never going to sort of provide you the golden answer, but they're all going to be indications for you. Like generally, how do we compare and that kind of a thing. And that's, I think, what most people are looking for is, are we hot or cold? That kind of thing.
What do you think of, we do surveys, not so much around financials and expenses and such, but, governance and leadership and strategic planning. That's some decent benchmarking data. But you're right, it's hard to find this for a firm like ours in Chicago with a similar practice mix. Where are you going to get that? And, you kind of weigh it from different sources and get your ranges and such. What do you think of the ALM survey of law firm economics? Very expensive.
It is expensive. It's good data though. I mean, it's definitely one good source. We get some good stuff from the banks. PwC does a great survey. And a couple of the other ones do some good ones as well. And again, it's almost like a target area. If you're looking at associate comp, that would be kind of one place to go. Real estate. I mean, obviously some of the brokerage houses.
Wakefield, great data around it in real estate. Yeah.
Do some great work on that. So there's, so it kind of depends what your area of focus on.
John, in our mid-law, we did a mid-law survey in New York this year, and this is an eye-popping number, but our overhead per lawyer average, and this speaks to the work that Rob can do potentially at all these firms.
This is for Third Avenue office space, Class A, right?
The average is, and these are mid-law firms. They're not in the most expensive places in New York. Real estate is obviously a big component, but our number is about 155. That's 155,000 per lawyer.
I get that question tossed at me. I go with 140 to 160, depending on a lot of the factors Bill mentions. Yeah. And the associates have no idea how much it takes to maintain an office for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A little lesson on law firm economics, it wouldn't hurt, and so they understand the concepts and why it's so important to track your time contemporaneously, and all those good things. Boy, our time is up. 3:00 on the dot. And I want to thank Rob Mattern for your support today's program, participation on our faculty. And Bill, great to meet you and great to have you with us too. Really appreciate your taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our crowd here on the MPF webinar.
Always a pleasure.
Any parting shots, Bill, Rob, before we end the show?
No, slow and steady wins the race, right, Rob? I mean, you got to, this is, don't look for the golden nugget. This is slow incremental changes add up. And so just put some focused time on this and you'll get there.
Yeah, don't be complacent.
Bill, thank you. Rob, thank you. Uri, I'm going to give you the last word. So what is it?
I'm going to I'm going to echo a comment that I think, forgive me, who said it earlier, which is every year you should be looking at expenses. I mean, it's just silly not to. And this year more so than not. And I think that makes a lot of sense and is well worth the time.
Reminders, give us your feedback, please. We want to hear from you. We're recorded. We'll send you a follow-up email either tomorrow, Friday at the very latest with the recording, our handout, our polling data. Our next regular webinar like this one will be on June 21st, the third Wednesday of the month. And then we've got that very special MPF webinar we'll be sending information about in the coming days. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Our contact information, I'm sure Bill, Rob, Uri would be delighted to hear from you if you want to reach out and carry forth the conversation, have any questions. Bill, thanks again. Rob, appreciate it very much. And you all have a great rest of the day. And thanks again.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.